Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of the Sanctum Secorum podcast. It is our 50th episode, and we want to do things with a bit of grand flair. So tonight we have special guests, plural, and even a very special giveaway, all while we continue to plumb the depths of Appendix N as it pertains to the Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game. We are here to help you serve these literary offerings at your DCC RPG table. I am Keeper Jet. With me tonight, as always, is Keeper Marc.
Hello, everyone.
And Keeper Bob.
Hey, folks.
And our most illustrious special guest, the Dark Master himself, Joseph Goodman. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here.
Great to have you. And I'm not exaggerating. It's really awesome after all of the encouragement that you have provided to us. It's awesome to finally get you here.
Once every 50 episodes. That's my policy.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Tonight we are going to discuss Mr. Goodman's own favorite Appendix N tale, The Tower of the Elephant by Robert E. Howard. This story is considered a classic of Conan lore and is often cited as one of Howard's best tales. All right, Bob, take it away.
In the Zamorian city of Aranjun, also known as the City of Thieves, a young Conan is drinking in a rowdy tavern when he overhears a Gothic rogue describe a fabulous jewel known as the Heart of the Elephant, which is kept in a tower by an evil sorcerer named Yara, of whom even the king of Zamora is afraid. Conan ventures into Yara's garden to steal the jewel and encounters Taurus of Nemedia, known as the Prince of Thieves, who has the same agenda. Taurus is wily and fat, but amazingly agile. Impressed with Conan's daring, Taurus agrees that they will work together. And work together they do, right? It's
for a little bit.
Yeah.
I suppose it's hard to spoil a story from 1933.
Fair. It is in the public domain. You know, I'm dying to hear why this is your favorite, Joseph.
You know, I've read a lot of Appendix N, and at this point, a lot of pre-Appendix N. And I don't know. I was trying to prepare for this and think about why it is my favorite, and I don't know why. It's just so good. I think part of what has made it one of my favorites recently is now that I have two kids and I'm trying to read stories to them, and we were just talking about this a year or two ago, I figured it was time to expose my older son to quality literature. This is shortly after I exposed him to Bruce Lee movies and he punched a kid in the face at school. So I decided maybe he wasn't ready for Bruce Lee. We should switch over to literature. Luckily, he hasn't applied a sword to anybody at school. But I wanted to find a good Conan story to read to him. And this is what I started with. And I think part of the reason I now like it so much is that he loved it so much. And it opened his eyes to, I mean, obviously he'd read plenty of fantasy literature in the sense of like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, that kind of stuff. But this just sort of opened his eyes to a new kind of fantasy literature. And I think that he will, I'll always love it as a result. But it's just like classic D&D. And if you discover this after you've discovered D&D, you think it's obviously based on a D&D story because they meet in a bar and go out and have an adventure. And it's the reverse. This is where D&D came from. That's what also makes it so amazing.
That's a really good reminder, especially with the current climate, right?
Yeah. That's my take. It's such a great story. I'm open to hearing from you guys as well. What makes you guys love it so much?
Go ahead, Marc.
It's such a short but packed with everything story. I mean, rereading it for the podcast, it's amazing how much he gets into the story as far as like alluding to backgrounds and history, and just creating this sense of a world. And it's only got these 3 chapters. It's very much a 1, 2, 3 act. Where he gets the information, he goes to the tower, and then he encounters the Yara at the end. But you get such a depth to it. I think that's one thing that really, attracts me to it. And also, I think this is like, if you've seen the movie Conan, and, I think most people have, and that's what I grew up, before I even read the Conan stories was, seeing the movie Conan, that I think that this Conan as presented is inexperienced, younger, and also human, right? There's a lot of like sort of terror elements and fear, but he overcomes them with, this sort of like, the skills and sort of background that he has. But it's really this kind of like younger and experienced Conan that's also really kind of appealing as well to me.
It's before the pit fights, Conan.
It is becoming Conan, right?
That's fair.
It does. It portrays him as a bit more human, as Marc said, but also the story is told in such a visual format, which is kind of hysterical when you think about the fact that most people that have watched anything with Conan the Barbarian have seen the visuals, right? I mean, they took like half of this for Conan the Barbarian, and the original script treatment for Conan the Destroyer was Conan Prince of Thieves. I mean, this story was everything for the films, and it just makes it very approachable. If you've never read it before, it feels a little familiar, and if for some reason you haven't seen the films, shame on you.
Hey,
it's still just
no shame
a fantastic read.
But I think if you're coming into Dungeon Crawl Classics from really anywhere, but even from D&D 5e, I think you should read the story no matter what. You should read the story, to your grandma next time you visit her at the nursing home. Everybody should read the story on a regular basis for everyday life. But if you happen to also be coming into DCC from the 5e world, it's especially interesting because Robert E. Howard does such a great job of making fascinating encounters out of simple topics. You basically have a bunch of lions in a courtyard that had their vocal cords taken out, and that's terrifying. You have a giant spider that can spin webs, and the way he describes it is first killing a thief that, Conan doesn't know how he died and finds these small puncture wounds, and it swings by so fast it's
like
just a
3,
blur.
yeah.
Like there's such simple elements of adventure that are done so well that you can transform not every day, but what we think of now as mundane animal encounters that you like skip over when you're reading the monster manual, giant spider, whatever, lion, whatever, but they're great adventure. And so I think there's just a lot there too about how to craft an exciting adventure, first with mundane elements. And then Marc, as you mentioned earlier when we were chatting before the show, like in the last, 5 pages of the story, he faces off with an alien from another dimension, planet, who knows what, who may or may not be a god, and has a crazy jewel that traps the greatest sorcerer in the land. And it goes from very mundane encounters to very fantastic, extraordinary stuff in a very short period. I just think it's a fascinating way to construct an adventure, and give in this case, the protagonist, but maybe in a DCC game, the characters like a fascinating adventure, with just working with so little and making it so amazing.
And in the same...
I think
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think your point about that really resonated with me this time in the reading of the spider encounter, because it's like one of the things, like you said, it's like, oh, let's have a random encounter table, and you see a spider. Okay, well, you got to fight the giant ants, you got to fight the giant spider, but the way it's told, it really is a toolkit for judges going into their games to make everything special, because Conan almost dies. It's probably, I think it's one of the things that is probably the closest he comes to death in many of the stories, because this is like a creature that's fearsome and fast, just as fast as he is, and it has these thick ropes that he has to avoid, and he almost gets trapped. It's really great just for that sort of like micro piece to say, take that to the table, take that sort of energy and and fear, try to translate that even with the most mundane of encounters.
Well, and the devil's in the details, right? Because when, as Jen mentioned, when he finds that his companion Taurus is dead, and he finds 3 puncture marks. So it's not like a pair of mandibles or a sting. It's some sort of trio, which makes, the longer you think on that small detail, the more weird and alien that spider becomes. Even its size. A lot of times people will describe something as, it was the size of a large hound. No, it was the size of a pig. And so already you've got kind of that off-putting size visual comparison, and then these just weird details, and your mind just can run away with it. And so that really feels very DCC.
Well, they didn't have buses back in the 30s per se, so pigs were the closest thing. I don't know. But much like, I would say much like DCC itself, there's very little wasted prose, if any, in the story. There's not a wasted paragraph or segment it's just continual cinematic action, which, man, okay, yeah, I have learned, yeah. This is exactly what brings it home for me.
Well, and each chapter kind of stands on its own as this cool little vignette, right? I mean, there's Conan getting the information in the bar, and someone being insulted, and then everything goes dark. And when the lights come on, Conan is gone, and the guy that picked the fight is dead. And it's boom, boom, boom. There's just so many little moments like that. It really is. It's almost a masterclass in storytelling. It's very stripped down. There's not a whole lot of additional, padding in there. It's just the story, and it moves.
I love that bar scene, because I one thing that pulled out to me this time when I was reading is that it's lit by a single candle, and that really evokes this sort of like very different image, from like lit up tavern, with like everything. It's like one candle, and then it goes out and it's dark.
And
actually, that's a great point. I
Yeah.
think so much of like good fantasy is about the fact that peasants are poor, and being
Right.
a farmer is no fun at all, And so I think a lot of the scenes, in Conan's cities are always like filled with waste, and depressing places, and it's not, there's no magic stores selling 5,000 GP bracers plus one, like you're just
Yeah.
scraping by, and so I feel like that element of whatever, working class fantasy or whatever you want to call it really comes across. To your point, Mark, I actually didn't catch that, but you're right. The one candle thing is perfect, and it is like such a seedy bar, where they're all sitting around trying to figure out what to rob next.
I really like that descriptor. It's working class fantasy. I mean, everybody that's in that bar, whether they're adventurers or not, they're adventurers because they work for a living. They are no heroes, and so it's all about getting by. And we've got the guy that's like, yep, I'm going to kidnap this person, and I'll have him across the border and sell him, and it's going to be great.
Right.
Which is just a terrifying concept, but it's
it's really bad, because that guy's in there talking to the natives like he's going to teach them how to
that's right.
Market other people and steal other people, but they're the experts at it. That hit me.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about when I reread it this time is that the last time I read this was actually, I think, Joseph, when I was on the assignment to go to Robert E. Howard's house, in Plainview, Texas, which is a couple hours away from where I live. And I downloaded an audiobook to listen to, and this is one of the stories I listened to. But when you go there, it is such a rural environment, such a, poor. It's very, it's a very, sort of like, working class, farms and very small town. And that's what Robert E. Howard was lived in for all his life and grew up in. He had direct experience with, the sort of, very isolated rural culture, but he, reached out and touched, so much, through correspondence or through his, obviously through, writing for the magazines and things like that. But it is such a transporting experience to like go into this like very rural community and see, I mean, it would be very much like there's a pig, next door, there could be a spider just looking out the window, type thing.
Well, everything's bigger in Texas. Maybe there are pig-sized spiders down there. I know there's thumb-sized wasps called cow killers. So,
ouch.
Can we not? So this story was first published in March, I believe, of 1933.
Just like 3 years before Howard died.
Yeah, but then he started writing early, right?
Well, he started writing when he was 9, but that stuff wasn't published. But I mean, he's one of the big three of weird tales, right? It's Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, and Clark Ashton Smith. They're the big three, and of course, he and Lovecraft were lifetime friends, going back and forth with letters, and so it's always kind of interesting when you see Lovecraft references slowly kind of bubble into Howard. And every once in a while, Lovecraft would return the favor. But Howard's stuff is so great. I mean, yeah, it's a product of its time, but like his boxing stories are still great. You just have to read them.
No wonder Joseph likes them so much.
Yeah. But
his writing is great. Yeah. I mean, I wish I had a tenth of his talent. It's amazing. To your point, Mark, where he came from, just the talent he produced. It's incredible.
So Joseph, I know you only have a little bit of time with us. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about your feelings about the story, your thoughts, and you want to share?
I keep coming back to it. The authors that I tend to reread again and again and again tend to be Robert E. Howard. The other really good one I reread a lot is The Gods of Balsagoth, which is great. But the opening fight scene on the ship, where the lights keep coming in and out because it's a storm and like the lightning strikes. Like Howard has such an amazing ability to describe fight scenes. To your point, Bob, in like such vivid cinematic ways. But anyway, but Howard, Lovecraft, and Clark Ashton Smith are the three that I like basically reread on a cycle every so often. And can't live without at this point. But I think I'd just say the reason I like Tower of the Elephant so much is that having read it aloud to my kids now twice, it reads really well out loud. So I know this sounds weird, but if you haven't read it out loud recently, try it. I know, Marc, you probably know the story, but apparently Howard would shout out loud as he typed. The stories are that he would bang like super hard on the keyboard and shout out his words as he typed them. And it was, and like,
wow.
Now that I've read this out loud, I can see it. Like there's a lyrical quality to the words, So I would say try reading it out loud to your kids if you have some, or just to yourself, or on the bus, or wherever you want. And it's
in the street in a sombrero. I think that's the other thing they use.
That's right.
Just shout Robert E. Howard stories at strangers. I did not know that about his writing.
In San Francisco, it'd fit right in, right?
Yeah. There's already a guy doing that down on Market Street. So
I imagine it flows a little easier than Clark Ashton Smith, though, especially for the kids.
Yeah.
At least.
But it's a great story. I recommend it to everybody. It's really good.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yay.
So maybe you'll only wait 25 more episodes for each other?
Sounds like a plan.
Maybe. Yay.
I'm wearing him down. I'm wearing him down.
We will take the win, and we'll be right back. And we're back. We thought we'd take a little time to resume our normal structure, if you will. And guys, we've got a Howard story. What are we starting up for it?
I want to write up rope made from the tresses of dead women.
Yeah.
That is so, especially it's 150 feet of rope. It is so creepy. It is such a creepy concept, but it is such a folk magic concept, right? I mean, it reads like something out of like Appalachian. If you give a woman a piece of cheese, it will fascinate her. If you bind the hair of dead women, you will have an unbreakable rope. It is so creepy and cool.
Fair.
So that would be where I would start, right?
It really speaks to Taurus and Namidia's dedication. It's referenced in also when he goes and gets the powder, and he spends like so much time and energy doing that, and he's so precise. 150 feet of dead women's hair is pretty extreme, but there's one person that could do it. It's probably.
I think that anybody that works for Locks of Love would probably have a heart attack when reading that line. Just the amount of hair it would really require.
You're a monster,
right? I'm not a monster. Taurus is a monster.
But it's again, we were kind of talking about this earlier, with Joseph, that taking something that is so routine and mundane in our current 5e other systems, like you get a magic rope, this is a rope that has texture and history, because the magic comes from how it was created and how it was built, and it's kind of going back to those elements that Howard's so good at, with the descriptions. And I love that idea of just being ready for the judges to use and like really imbue your magic with some history and some uniqueness, like DCC kind of expounds as well.
It really makes me wonder about the cultural origins of that. Like, where did he pluck that from back in the 30s?
I would say his fevered little mind.
Fair.
He was already talking to Lovecraft at this point. Just saying, it is not the strangest thing that he ever wrote.
But the silent lions, really? It just you debarked the lions.
Well, and they never really say why they're silent, right? Are they trained to be? Are they magically so? Yeah.
I like Joseph's story, that they took the vocal cords out and
but they just complete silent stalkers. It was so creepy.
Yeah.
Another weird kind of cosmic thing that definitely shows that Howard and Lovecraft were of a similar mind on several things was the race of Yag, from which we get our tragic figure in this story. These green elephantine creatures with wings coming off of their shoulders that travel the stars. If you swap elephant head for like squid, you see where I'm going here. It's very kind of cosmic horror, Lovecraftian, and Conan responds appropriately, right? Yeah, he's like, ah!
Yeah.
And finally, I would say the blood magic, right? Cut out my heart and squeeze my heart's blood over this stone so that I can lay this final enchantment. That sort of thing is just ripe for being written up.
Yeah.
Marc?
What about you, Mark?
So I think speaking of Taurus and in him as a character, he'd make a great NPC just to have, as part of his stories. We only get such a small glimpse of him in this, and it's for the story and the narrative, it's great because you have this sort of build up, and he's very much like, he's like the apex of the civilization counter to Conan's savageness, but even at that apex, he's like quickly dispatched. It's one of those great sort of devices, like, oh, we just met that guy, and he's dead now, and it leads into that the awesome encounter that Conan has with the spider. So, but I think he'd be just like he's kind of perfect for this kind of Falstaffian character, has this these depths of his ability that belie his appearance, and I think that's kind of a fun thing.
That's actually a really good comparison, comparing him to Falstaff. That's really solid.
And I think that he, also speaking of like his magic, he creates this powder, right? But he has to go gather it and get the resources for it. He spends a lot of time, and it's this this amazing scene where they spread in instructions like, if the wind shifts, we have to like get out of here really fast, otherwise it'll kill us in an instant, just like it's killing these lions. So the powder of the Black Lotus would be another one to stand up.
Oh, that was in a copper tube, right?
Yeah, it's in like copper tube for.
And when Conan asked, "What is that?" all he could say was, "Well, this is what it is, and I went on a big long quest to get it." But that's a different story. But he didn't actually know how it killed. It just did.
Well, and it's funny because it's not just Black Lotus; it's Stygian Black Lotus. And again, harkening back to the movie, right? Black Lotus, the best Stygian Black Lotus. So, in the movie, it's a drug. In the story, it is incredibly poisonous.
Yeah, different quantities can have a different effect. That's you take it in microdoses.
Okay.
Conan's microdosing Stygian Black Lotus.
The last one, we already talked about the spider, being this kind of great encounter, taking the mundaneness of that. I think that's that's something you don't need to necessarily stat up, but you can just sort of imbue your own encounters. But the last thing I thought of is that Yag Kasa as a patron, right? He's not a god, or he might be, but he's this alien creature, and he's clearly got these powers that extend beyond sort of the what Conan's experience is, and Yara taps into that. But I think the elephant alien being as a patron is like a perfect DCC thing, where you could really have a fun time statting up the spells and how that could be used by your players.
Well, especially he is shown to be so powerful. I mean, not only does it know how many people that Conan has killed prior to getting there. Oh, well, you killed one in a tavern, you killed one here, and there was another death near you. It is so perceptive, whether it's magically so or telepathically. There is so much latent power kind of bubbling beneath the surface of that figure, and yet it has been so abused that it is just ready to die.
Yeah.
And it also hinted that Conan was playing right into Yara's hands. Because there have been 2 deaths. Mine will be the 3rd. I really wonder what was slated to come next, but we never get that. And it's both infuriating and really good storytelling.
What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I'm definitely going back to the spiders because the 3 puncture wounds and the quote of the castanet rattle of the monstrosity's fangs. What? That's just, yeah, okay, let's do this. And honestly, I would make up an NPC as well, but it'd be the NPC that everyone loves to hate. It'd be the Kothians.
Oh yeah.
The ones making fun of our heroes in the tavern and offering that first snippet of a quest, and also taking the first blade.
Well, and I mean, also there's the heart of the elephant itself, right? I mean, it is purported to have been a key part of so many things that have happened. Whether the gem truly contains the power, or if it's merely a focus for the power, it certainly could be quite interesting to write up based on the stories told. With like Yankosha using that to build the tower in a night, or turning a prince into a spider. Hopefully not a pig-sized spider with castanet.
No. But I mean, we could also write up. Well, geez, I don't know if you could encompass the feeling of the whole thing, because it's all very tragic at the end. All that work, and Conan still walks away with 0 treasure. All those gems, all that treasure, and the one thing he came for is sacrificed.
Well, I think as anybody that has run a party of adventurers who tend to leave things, right? They stow them. Well, we'll just get this on the way out. We'll get this on the way out. They never get it on the way out because things are always going horribly wrong. Towers are collapsing, buildings are on fire, mobs are chasing them. So again, it is Conan setting the groundwork for what would later become a regular gaming trope. Well, there was a lot of treasure. We just didn't get it. I mean, the top of the tower, right? All the walls encrusted with gems and crystals, a veritable fortune there. But
but he wasn't exactly dressed to carry much of that. I think he just reduced to a loincloth.
Well, which is
he took off his bloody shirt, and I don't. Okay, I mean,
and
climbing a wall.
The description of Conan wearing a tunic and the high wrap sandals and a loincloth, and then he's down to the loincloth. I'm like, okay, so we have kind of this like Roman style barbarian description, and now all of a sudden we're Schwarzenegger in a loincloth. Okay, I see the transition here. This is
oh, he leveled up.
Yeah.
Question mark.
And Elena has a really good point. Maybe the heart of the elephant, it doesn't even have to be shaped like a heart, but maybe it's formed from something like the cursed remains of a dead deity.
Oh, yeah, phylacteries and things of that nature. Yeah, we could look into the annual for things like that.
Well, I mean, this is after the time that the oceans drank Atlantis, and so maybe it is something from there. Maybe it is not something that Yankosha brought, but something that was given to him to use. There's all sorts of possibilities there. So the gemstone would be really, really neat, I think, to write up.
There are. There's so many possibilities and so many things that I would mesh into this, but I'm going to get way too far ahead of myself. We're going to hit a BRB real quick and be back with another special guest.
Yay!
Hello again. For those of you paying close attention, you'll notice that our opening and interim music has been a little different than usual. Tonight we're playing Atop the Sorcerer's Tower from Beyond the Rusted Gate by Francis Roberts. And he's with us tonight to talk about some of his musical inspirations, especially regarding Tower of the Elephant, Conan, fantasy, etc. And I will step aside and hand this one over to Bob. Marc, we know this is totally his territory, right?
No, it is not just me. Look, it's not just me. There's another person here. So it's definitely not just me.
Francis, you're far more interesting. Hi, we haven't seen you in forever.
Hi, yeah, it's been way too long. Thanks for having me on. And hi to anyone watching. Where should we begin with this?
Well,
I feel like there's so much to talk about, and it's hard to talk about music without necessarily knowing who's heard what. So I think that the best thing to do is to talk about maybe the most famous examples first.
Sure.
Yeah, like I feel like if we're talking about the Tower of the Elephant, should we start with the soundtrack of the Conan films from the 80s?
I think that is the one place that we all agree on.
Yes.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the original like Schwarzenegger film is probably, I feel like, inspired by the Tower of the Elephant more than many of the other stories. There's so many little tidbits from that particular story that sort of made their way into the movie, I think. And as a result, it's a great place to start. And what a great soundtrack. It's probably best.
Oh, it's almost like the soundtrack is an additional character, or even maybe the narrator of the story. It just carries everything forward. There's so much time there with no dialogue that it's written to be so evocative, and so it is so perfect for so many things.
Yeah, it's I think it's really one of the best soundtracks for the genre.
Yeah, and it was really impactful. Recently I had a chance to watch it in the theater, right? Which I was too young to watch it in the theater before, and I'd always heard it through television speakers, or whatever I was listening to. But it is so immersive in that theater experience, and it is like another character in the story, and it's wonderful to anybody who gets a chance, like if it's doing like any kind of like touring repertory thing, something like that, you should really take advantage of that and go and watch it in the theater, even if you've seen the film before. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I just got a chance to do that too, and whatever it was the anniversary showings that just happened, right?
Back in December, yeah.
Like, what a tragedy to watch that by myself in a movie theater, right? Like I thought people would go. I was really disappointed that it was me and like maybe 2 other people in there. So
same.
Jen and I saw it with I think we were 2 of maybe 6 or 7 people.
Yeah.
Not even that many.
Yeah. So,
but it's a lot better than listening to the soundtrack ad nauseum from down the hall.
Which Jen has been listening to pretty much all day.
Down the hall, yes.
Yeah, it is one of those things that you ask a writer, like, what are you listening to when you're writing, for fantasy or things like that, for adventures, for DCC. That's probably the number one thing that comes up is like just putting that on repeat and listen to it. So
yeah, I definitely make my neighbors listen to
it. Love it.
But that's got to be like one of the big inspirations for anything in this genre. And I mean, I think we've all heard stuff that is reminiscent of it. The first thing that came to mind when Bob bugged me about this was when you turn on Baldur's Gate 1. If any of you are familiar with that game, but 1997 CRPG, also probably best in class. Like as far as 90s RPGs go, that's like the one I always reference. But the intro music to that is like so obviously a ripoff of the Conan soundtrack in such a good way. Just the battery of drums come in and then just the slow brass melody, so good. And I think that just treating an orchestra like it's a character, I think like you were saying, Marc, is where that comes from. Just giving each character in the film their leitmotif or whatever it is that's going to accompany them onto the screen and off the screen. Just
almost like writing
stuff.
a musical, right? You include that part for the pit to interact with the stage.
And it's like it's basically like rooted in programmatic orchestra music. I think that's a lot of rooted in film music, right? Because 1980s film music had been pretty solved at that point, but that style is rooted in ballets and stage performances, and sometimes before that you have programmatic music. I brought up Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique as a great example of that. Are you all familiar with that piece at all?
I had to study that years ago. I loved it. It was right up there with Liszt.
Cool. Yeah, it's early romantic, and it is the performances of it initially were, well, how do you put this? The audience was given the bill or whatever that's showing who's performing, whatever what's that called even? The program?
Program
right?
Of the playbill, yeah.
And it included a story for each movement. So it's like here's what's happening in your head during this music. So this music is designed to accompany this theatrical performance that I didn't have the budget to put on. So you have to put it in your head. And the piece of it that I think is really like progenitor for fantasy movie genre and for stuff like this. The story, listen to this. This is the program notes. Basically what's just happened in the story previously to this is that the character, I think, took opium and hallucinated that he watched his own execution, something like that. So, not too different from the like Stygian Black Lotus stuff that you were just talking about. But and so he sees himself at a witch's sabbath this is the quote, in the midst of a hideous gathering of shades, sorcerers and monsters of every kind who have come together for his funeral. Strange sounds, groans, outbursts of laughter, distant shouts which seem to be answered by more shouts. The beloved melody appears once more, but has now lost its noble and shy character. It is now no more than a vulgar dance tune, trivial and grotesque. It is she who, coming to the Sabbath, roar of delighted arrival, so on and so forth. It's like that's like the genre of like what this playbill had for not a play, just orchestra music. And it's like that's it. That's early pulp fantasy right there.
That's great.
Oh, okay. So now we have someone that has taken some sort of strange hallucinogenic plant and is seeing strange things. So now is the perfect time to bring up your recent work for the film The Spine of Night.
Oh, which we just watched. Yes.
We literally just watched it last night. It's an animated, I would definitely call it a sword and sorcery film.
It's very heavy metal.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it for kids.
Lucy Lawless,
definitely not.
Richard Grant, Joe Manganiello, Patton Oswalt. It's got a great cast, and there are portions of the film that are very similar to what you just described.
Yeah. That's a great segue. Actually, I wouldn't have thought of that, but the portion of it that I scored is very much like that. It's like here's this giant skull with flowering plants in it that make you have this like psychedelic experience, and they asked me to do the music with like they wanted it to be very psychedelic synthesizer. They were like, you got a Moog synthesizer and like a Mellotron and stuff like that, like use that stuff. We want it to be like very like 1970s echo and stuff like that. I always use gongs for that, just like like it's got to be gong, but it's mostly just like old school synthesis, like early electronic music sounds, and you take that stuff off of the grid that young music producers are so familiar with, and suddenly it becomes like the music is that turn of the knob. It's like and it's just not in time, and just this wash of delightful messy sounds.
Well, and so I've got to ask, what sort of inspirations did you draw on when working on that piece?
I mean, the biggest one was
besides A Misspent Youth.
Yeah. You know more about that than I do. You were there for it. Some of it, at least.
Now, kids.
Yeah. Let's see. I would say the biggest one, and this is, I don't know if this is a cop out of an answer, but the biggest one was the placeholder. They sent me the because the film, we didn't mention this, but for those of you watching, the film is not just an animated film, but it is a rotoscope animated film, which means that the frames are drawn over live actors, and so essentially every frame is traced rather than drawn from scratch, and. Sorry, this is funny. You'll know why. When you do that, you don't buy costuming for the actors, right? You don't like have like the coolest costume in the world and like a cool sword and stuff like that. If the actor's supposed to be wearing like a pauldron on their shoulder, you make that out of like a cardboard box or something because you're just tracing over it. So it's like I'm watching these characters that are going to be voiced by, like Lucy Lawless or Patton Oswalt, whoever's that character. I'm watching these characters not knowing who the final voice actor will be because that hadn't been cast yet. So I'm essentially watching the filmmakers and their friends like jump off of their bed in their bedroom with a cardboard sword and hit each other with it. And I would say about a quarter of it had been drawn over at the point that I got it. So a great deal of it was just placeholders of, people just like you or me jumping off of their bed with a cardboard stick, saying like, don't worry, this will be cool. And they sent me a couple of other videos they'd done and like tests to prove that it would be cool. But,
that's
just
funny.
Seeing that and like using your imagination and being like, how could we make this cool? And I did my best to like make it cool without being done. And of course that can't quite be done, but I think they knocked it out of the park. They made it very cool. But that was the big inspiration. And I always tell people, and it surprises them, that I don't listen to a ton of music. I did that, and I spend most of my music time making music. And I actually, if we talked about like when you're writing your personal tabletop campaign, which I'm constantly doing. That's probably my most time-consuming hobby outside of everything else that I do. I generally score my own games, so I'll write music for the characters that are in the games, and I'll have that music on in its temporary state because it's, when you make music, it doesn't come out mixed and mastered, and you listen to it a little bit to get to the point where you decide what needs to change or what needs to be improved. And I'm listening to the temporary version of the music that I'm going to be using in my, campaign session when I'm writing it. So I'm listening to my own music because it's not done yet. So I need to go take a break from writing a monster or statting out a magic item to go fix the music real quick because it sucks at 2 minutes and 46 seconds or whatever.
Man,
I was gonna say I've seen you've done a lot of game related materials on YouTube and released on Bandcamp, a number of things.
And SoundCloud, right?
Yeah,
I've done stuff for like dungeon synth instructionals, and so yeah, Conan and gaming is sort of in your blood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And older pieces that you've done, like with Old Man Wizard and
can we not refer to Old Man Wizard as older? Because I remember when Old Man Wizard released the first time, and
like 6 or so years ago. I don't,
Old Man Wizard started more than 10 years ago. Can you believe that?
Oh man,
isn't that bad?
Yeah. Okay, so the last album I have is like 6 years old. Man.
But
they're not all synth, right?
No, not at all.
There's been a progression from live instruments to synth, and you've kind of run the gamut.
Sort of to combine the two eventually, and that's what I've been doing. You'll actually really like the stuff I'm working on right now. It's not close to done yet, so I'm sure you'll get around to hearing it when it is. But to the end of or to the point of me saying like the musically, like I'm listening to my own music. That's no exception in that film. I was in a very fortunate position. Do you know what a temp score is?
Not familiar
yes.
with it.
So it's like the director will, or the filmmakers will have a working cut of their movie, and they'll put music that they don't have rights to in it. So
Oh,
like,
okay.
you know, like I was sort of imagining something like this, for example, here. I was imagining something like this here, and you know, it'll be like the soundtrack to another movie. It's like, this is the vibe we want, and it's like they're not gonna, you know, license Hans Zimmer's score from, you know, like Pirates of the Caribbean for their new movie, because that's completely ridiculous, right? So, but they will be like, this is the vibe we want. And for Spine of Night, they reached out to me because I was the temp score.
Oh, cool.
So,
oh wow,
they were like, there was a piece of music that I'd done that they'd found somehow on, probably on tags on YouTube or Bandcamp or something, I can't remember. And they said like, hey, we have this scene in the movie, and by scene it's like a 10-minute segment, right? And we want something like this. They sent it to me, and they're like, this is what we're using, and we were wondering if you take commissions. And I was like, yeah, I do. And that's like, how flattering is that? That they wanted me to do music in the style of my music.
Wow, what a moment.
That is a lot nicer than we'd like you to do it in the style of Hans Zimmer, but we can't afford Hans Zimmer. Yeah, no, that's much more fun.
It's much better. Being asked to do something in the style of, you know, Hans Zimmer or John Williams, and having them think that you're capable of that, though, that's also a different kind of compliment.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Haven't gotten that one yet.
Well, and then okay.
Oh, I was just saying, sort of ending the thought, I was going to move on to another one of the pieces of music we talked about, but you had a better segue than I did last time. So.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, from Spine of Night, and your piece there is definitely kind of 70s synth, but the Conan stories, I think, especially with the original soundtracks, are probably best known for the way they impacted metal music, right? I mean, everybody looked like Conan for a while. I mean,
no, do you think that's the music, or do you think that's like the cool looking bad guys? Like,
I think it's a little of all of it, right? I mean, there was a period in the 80s where half of the heavy metal bands looked like they'd just stepped out of a D&D adventure.
Yes.
When did Venom start?
I'm not sure.
Venom band, 1978.
Man.
I feel like they're like one of the ones that I associate with, you know, having like sort of like balding long hair and like holding a mace and wearing chainmail.
Yeah, the balding long hair, that really is the look, right, of the villains from Conan.
With bangs, always bangs.
And they were always from somewhere. They were somewhere in Europe, just from like the deepest, darkest forests of Europe. Here comes three guys with half a head of hair between them, and a whole lot of metal and swords.
Bangs and mullets. Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably take a bunch of that hair and make a magic rope out of it, Bob. I think that's
you're probably right. Yeah, bangs and mullets, or square cut manes, or whatever Howard describes it as.
Nice.
Oh jeez.
So we have a playlist here, Bob. Is that does that include Francis?
That does. We do have like last time, we have a Spotify playlist. It's 5+ hours of music, and it includes. I mean, if you go looking for music that was inspired by the Tower of the Elephant, you're gonna be pulling up a lot of stuff. I mean, there is, and I am not an expert on hip hop music in any way, shape, or form. So I am not qualified to tell you if it's good hip hop or if it's not. But there is a hip hop album, Tower of the Elephant, by Killa Non the Barbarian, and AKA
Nanny
DeVito.
There it is.
Donnie DeVito, I guess.
And amazing.
But in the lyrics there, he's directly referencing, Conan, and it struck me as very different. It was not something I expected to find inspiring hip hop, nor to be in hip hop. So that was kind of neat. But
I'm counting 5 with the title.
Oh yeah, so there was Tower of the Elephant by Iron Sword, by Akimbo, by our friends Loot the Body, who folks in the DC community should know. Pre-Dawn, Arkham Witch did a that is a pretty dark and heavy version, and that is from their album Give Me Death by Heavy Metal, just in case you weren't sure.
That's awesome.
And a lot of this is more recent. So I mean, it is dark, sometimes bordering on doom metal, right? There's a song Conan What Is Best in Life by Austrian Death Machine. They are Austrian Death Machine. It might surprise some of you, know they are a doom or death metal band. So there's a lot of really dark, heavy discordance.
Are you familiar with that band? They're the one that isn't the singer in Austrian Death Machine an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator?
I think so, because they've done like 3 different albums. All of them have Arnold style covers, and the majority of their music is all riffs. Like the titles, if you go down, there's What Is Best in Life, there's Crom, there's I'll Be Back. It is all this great Schwarzeneggerian references. So yeah, it is pretty wild. I mean, there's
another one I mentioned. I didn't see it on the list and suggested including it is Reverend Bizarre's EP Thulsa Doom.
Oh yes,
yeah, that one's also like directly. The cover, the album cover is that banner from the movie, and those are pretty cool. That's just straight up doom metal. Really cool stuff.
I mean, there's a song called Conan by Witchcraft. There's a band called Conan who have released a whole number. There's so much out there, and the majority of it is definitely metal. And I'm not really sure. Going back to what we said, I'm not really sure what it was about that drew metalhead musicians to Conan, other than at the time in the 80s, a lot of those guys had started in the early 70s, and they're like, well, I'm old, I'm kind of heavy set, and I don't have a lot of hair. Yeah, I can be a Conan villain. I don't know, man. It was just everything got so strange once you got into 80s metal, right? Like YNT with their giant robot. Everybody had a weird gimmick, and for a lot of them, the gimmick was maybe they're from Conan.
Elena, Manowar's the first one I think of when you say Conan style band. Yeah.
They wear the outfit after he gets in the bar fight outfit.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I am absolutely stoked to have over 5 hours of music to tune into. And of course, we'll share the link in our show notes and everything too for that Spotify playlist. Marc, I have to say, our new segment really appeals to me too. What is Keeper Marc's word of the day?
On the fly,
one last thing before we move on to that next segment, though.
Yeah?
Francis, you're working on one more thing. Was it Monstrosities? What's it called?
Oh, Monstrous. Sure.
Monstrous.
Yeah. I did the music for that at this point, and it's like I think that's actually going live on Kickstarter soon. I didn't have time. I haven't had a free minute since you invited me on. I'm not sure when that's going live on Kickstarter, but it's I believe it is probably, I think it's more for D&D, but I'm not completely certain. But it's
okay. We can make it our own
monster book supplement. And it's really, I think, a kind of a clever approach. It's more of like a motive centered approach to writing monsters. And it was like, it sounded cool. And the idea of doing music for someone's like, you know, tabletop role-playing book. Like tabletop role-playing music is like underrated, I think. Music specifically for that. And
so you did a soundtrack for a monster book?
No, it's just the soundtrack for the marketing materials for a monster
okay.
book. But same idea, right? I wish that I was they had the budget to score each monster, like do a like a interactive music.
Man.
With, like you could do that like a game and like have like a soundboard, click lich and it switches to the lich music, and click something else. And
what a perfect segue to the Dungeon Denizens Kickstarter that's going, which has over 500 monsters for either 5e or DCC, and the idea of having a soundtrack clip for every single monster, that would bankrupt us, I think.
Do you remember how I said I was working on a personal project that's not going to be done for a while?
What you're saying is they couldn't afford me to score every monster, so I'm doing it out of spite. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm doing something delightful. Sort of like that, specifically for the adventure I'm running. But I'm inevitably going to expand it.
Yeah, we gotta get you writing some DCC stuff, Francis.
I would love to. I actually, now that you mentioned it, I think I haven't played DCC yet.
But all right. So we're moving on.
I think it's in my cart. I think all the books are in my cart right now. I think I like forgot to check out. I got carried away, and then like I've been trying to get my D&D
it's okay,
to
man.
play it.
You know,
I'm like, this is what we need to do next. This is the next thing.
Well, yeah. War of the Cyclops Con is coming up. It's online. It'd be a great way to hop in and play some games.
May 6th and 7th.
I would love to do that, because it's like at the very, very top of my list right now. Like I said, it's in my cart.
It might not be tomorrow, but we'll fix that.
People in the chat are already discussing how to bring you properly into the fold, Francis.
Good.
Oh, that's
yeah. It's a family.
Mm-hmm.
And the other geeky part of my family is the word science as opposed to the musical sciences. Etymology, that's the word I'm looking for. Marc, hit me.
Yeah, I love this on the fly segment that we did last time, and then I forgot about it until I saw the show notes, and I was like, "Oh,
told you I was going to put it in the show."
We're totally keeping that.
I did, yeah. Well, this is such a short story that it's there's not a lot, but he's I think Joseph like mentioned this lyrical quality to it, which the writing and reading aloud aspect, which there's a lot of words in there that are very much like they flow in poetry sense. But the words that stuck out to me, the two words, and so I have two words of the day for our segment. Transcosmic, which is how Conan like describes the Yog-Kasha as this being, and it's his own word, right? It's like his own his own mind. So it's always kind of this like interesting like depiction of this savage person, but he's got this kind of eloquent way of thinking and speaking. And I love that term transcosmic, because it's kind of like this sense of awe and sense of like really fills the space of this being who is alien and not quite from his own experience. And the other one I loved, which is just a term that is in there because I think it's very much maybe of the time, but it's the term drinking jack. So a jack is like a cup that you might encounter, but I love that term because it's one of the things that you could use in a description, and you kind of instantly get this feeling of a place, the drinking jack as a term. So I love that word, and just how it's used in that opening tavern scene.
It's more of a leather mug, right? Like
yeah, exactly. Leather. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's those
exactly
are the two that I point out for people who kind of look at the words of Robert E. Howard and get some inspiration for their own descriptions of their own games.
And what's the OED rating?
Transcosmic is not in the OED, by the way, and Drinking Jack's not in the OED. I looked both of those up. Jack is in the OED because it's there, but this hyphenated Drinking Jack didn't appear in OED. So
Transcosmic is so Vancian too.
It is,
It has that feel.
it's that kind of cusp of neologism, where it's like this maybe invented word, but it's also very easy to invent because it's like two, compounds, put together. Vance is very much like, I'm just going to, invent complete the whole cloth, from some ancient source that he may have read and then translates, to the modern text. But yeah.
In fountain pen. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, my family. Yes. All right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we still have another special guest for you in our 50th episode. Yes, we are running a little long, but we've got one last bit to go over.
We have
two. Oh, yeah. Okay. Francis, it has been awesome having you. Thank you so much. And we might ask you back again sometime if you don't mind.
I would love to. This is the stuff that I like talking about.
And congratulations again.
Yeah, I really wanted to to jump in on some of the other conversations you were having.
Well, congrats again on your Spine of Night accomplishment. You were asked to write something like yourself. You just can't beat that, folks.
Yeah, it's always the best.
and as a quick note, the Spine of Night soundtrack is still available on vinyl from Yog-Sothoth Records. Jen, we have a copy coming.
Yeah.
I don't have it within arm's reach, but oh my god, the artwork on it. So
the cover art is gorgeous.
I mean, I'll pay. I'll buy it. Yeah. Somehow. Yeah.
I think it's Yugoth Records.
Or is it
Yugoth?
It is an elder horror from like a Lovecraftian horror, but I think it's Yugoth, not Yog.
Oh, you're right. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you for that timely clarification. All right, Elena, take us out. We will be right back. Hello again. With us for this portion, we have the illustrious Stephen Newton.
Illustrious. Well, thank you so much.
Well, authorious.
You were our first ever guest back in October of 2015 when we did our Halloween episode talking about Edgar Allan Poe.
Right. And the Cask of Amontillado, which still
that was
has
a fun episode.
Okay. Unfun?
No, super fun.
Oh,
double the fun.
Yes. Okay, so now that we've left Music World again and we're back in DCC land, I mean, this plays so nicely and overlays with so many different products. Marc, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I think the one that came out immediately is the Jeweler that dealt in Stardust. That's an adventure that was originally published by, or it's written by Harley Stroh. It's a level 3 adventure, and it was originally part of the Goodman Games first yearbook, the 2013 program guide. And it's
really?
Yeah, and it's one of these. It's a heist adventure, so very much like in context of like the Tower of the Elephants. It's you have to go into this jeweler's home and plan your encounter there, but you encounter something strange when you're inside there, and something unexpected, right? It's kind of like Conan going into the Tower of the Elephant and having the unknown of the magic and what that's going to be, and it's very tension filled. I love that adventure. It just as kind of like a mini adventure that was one of the early DCC ones, so I think that's one that you could easily take and put in a swords and sorcery type setting, instead of the urban setting that Harley put it into.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, first of all, you don't even have to really remove it from the urban setting, right? I mean, Conan is hopping walls and then climbing the tower, and in the Jeweler who dealt in Stardust, you have to worry about the watch catching you trying to break in. so you've got that similarity for the point of entry right there. And yeah, when I played it, and I absolutely loved it, we started on the ground floor and things were a little strange. Then as we went up, things got weirder. It's sort of the reverse of Conan going, okay, well, it's really nice up here up top of this tower. Let me go, oh my God, what is going on as I descend this tower? it's a great adventure.
Is it the spiders, really?
Well, and there's like those weird little like celestial bug spider things that sort of take it in a lot of ways. I think they take the place of Yog Kasha as the weird spatial mystic MacGuffin. But it is a fantastic adventure. And
it's easily playable in like a single session, which is
definitely
one of those things that it's really nice to find those and just introduce people to DCC, different type of than the standard sort of funnel. This is like a great way that you could say, hey, let's start out with some higher level characters and let's try this because it's a one shot, but it lets them experience like the different access to DCC that most people don't necessarily get to if they're just getting they're introduced to it. So I like that about it too.
And I think it was also in Free RPG Day 2012 alongside the Undulating Corruption. But you're right, it can be found in Chaos Rising now.
That's right. Yeah, it's got republished as part of the DCC 89. Yeah,
I'd forgotten that because when it was released, we played the Undulating Corruption. That was Jen my introduction to DCC.
It took
with
years for
Judge
me to finally
Big Troy
this.
Tucker. That is the adventure that convinced Jen to dive into DCC.
The other one I was thinking about, and this is more, we'll get into this a little bit later, but the Lankmar stories are so, they're obviously kind of like a follow on to Conan, and sort of like that, Liber and in that work is very much like
all of the yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have the
robbery.
Yeah, you have Farfred who's very much like this kind of savage, comes from like this more, the cold waste and or the cold, this aspect of the northern barbarians, right? But there's so many Lankmar stories. But Harley did another one called The Heist, which is part of the DCC 2020 adventure pack, I believe. And that's like where you have to go underground into, I think it may be the Overlord's catacombs or one of these areas of Lankmar where it's another heist inspired one. And again, Lankmar has so many like rich opportunities for Conan type stories. And I think you could easily take a Lankmar setting and convert it into something that's inspired by Conan more directly if you wanted to in your campaigns.
Now, The Heist was my first reaction after reading about the cats. Because those are actually incorporated into The Heist. And I was really confused at the time going, what? Okay, sure. I didn't realize how on the nose that was.
The Heist has been the only game that Harley has actually run for me. And I believe you were there at the table, Jen.
Yeah.
So it was at Gary Con a couple of years
and I
ago.
tanked it.
Yeah. So he's a performance artist. I really got to appreciate the way Harley was able to run that adventure back when it was still in playtest mode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What about you, Jen? Do you have some reskin inspiration?
Well, I mean, besides all of Lankmar, right? You've got The Heist, you've got Unholy Knights and Lankmar. They all kind of have that same theme, like the meats. The Rats of Ilthmar was really interesting because you're in an unfamiliar area trying to do the same thing. And that was kind of Conan's experience, I think. I see that tower, but what is it really? And honestly, from the moment they get up to the top of that tower, the entire ridge of it is gem encrusted. And as he goes into the first area, there's gemstones lining the ceiling of it. And our parties would have stopped right at the top with the gemmed edge there. They would have chiseled out the gems and called it good, right?
I'm having flashbacks to He Who Watches from Below.
One Who Watches from Below is exactly what I was referencing. Yep. The gems will be your downfall. And that one was by Job, I believe. Going back to Harley, Tower of the Black Pearl, which was an older one originally, and it was converted for DCC. The end scene, down to the elephantine statue figure at the at the end of the hall, yeah, it all plays out pretty similarly. But yeah, that's pretty much from my list, especially, you know, Jeweler's kind of a giveaway, right? It's the heist, and the titular The Heist. Yeah, that really rounds up my list. Stephen, did you have anything cool to add?
Yeah, there were two ones that jumped out at me. The first one, Doom of the Savage Kings, just because in my mind, that before there was the Lankhmar adventures, that was like the DCC equivalent of like a town adventure where things start there. There's a lot of intrigue, so
yeah,
that's where I got like the chapter 1 of that adventure where he's meeting and they're hearing about all the peoples of the realm. You know, Conan obviously being an outsider and understanding these people for the first time. So that gave me that vibe. And the second one would be Journey to the Center of Aerith, just because of the elephantine.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you'd call him a protagonist, but you know, MacGuffin. You don't really know what he's going to face. Yeah. And we'll call him an NPC. The NPC in the adventure that he deals with. You could easily make that a side quest of like the layers of Aerith or whatever they had the spin-off adventure where there were several spin-offs of that. I think you could throw that as a side quest if you were playing that adventure in there.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, I never thought of that. And
yeah, because he could just be another one of the Agartans have now been kidnapped by some other faction over there, so you could work with him that way.
Very cool. And last but not least, Keeper Bob.
So obviously, my brain also originally went to the Jewel of the Delta Stardust, and then I started thinking of tower adventures, right? So there's, you know, like the Tower Out of Time. There's a tower structure, you could play with it, and then I started thinking about it. And I realized that I've written a couple of heist adventures dealing with towers, to the point where I should probably stop writing heist adventures dealing with towers. So there's Blasphemy and Larceny in Lankhmar, and there's Magnific Machinations at the Grand Exposition of Marvels for DCC Dying Earth. And I think that Magnific Machinations. Hey, I wrote this a long time ago.
The Magnific Machinations of the Grand Exposition of Marvels.
I think that would be a fairly easy reskin, because you are literally looking for the weird gemstone MacGuffin there as well, that has strange powers and is doing very weird and creepy things, and so that would be an easy overlay.
Oh wow! I feel like I missed a beacon there.
Blasphemy and Larceny and Lankhmar isn't. I don't think wouldn't be quite as quick and easy of a reskin, because there's a lot more intrigue involved in like the entire back half of that adventure. But all the way to, you know, in the Dying Earth adventure, all the way to bad things happening in the tower. Although I would say that my tower is creepier than Howard's. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better written, because I mean, I'm not going to compare myself to Howard, but I'm going to say mine is creepier than Howard's, because I was going for creepy and Howard probably wasn't. And finally, maybe not so much a reskin as a conversion. Morton Braden with Zothnet Publishing put out a free adventure online, Tower of the Elephants. And it's available free online. And we're going to, with his permission, we are going to have the DCC conversion appearing in the first issue of Sanctum Secorum Quarterly.
Cool. Very nice.
So, and that is a full adventure, complete with, you know, the silent lions, pig-sized spiders. Because, you know, even, I just want to point out, even in the 30s, even in the 30s in the United States, we would use anything but normal measurements to declare the size of it. How big is that spider? No, it was the size of a pig. Really?
Maybe they were traumatized by Charlotte's Web. Are we talking like Orville-sized pig? Or...
Right? You know?
It's sort of how the foot evolved as a measurement. It could be, what size foot do you have? What size pig do you have for this?
Exactly. Is it a full-grown sow? Is it a piglet? Is it some
a foot-sized pig? Okay.
Bob, you talking about all these towers. It makes me think that towers used to be like were like kind of like the tentacles of Goodman Games adventures. I forgot that like another one, America Was Framed, has a tower. It's like one of these early DCC adventures that just like the towers.
We've got to be careful, or we're gonna have a tower moratorium like we did.
Yeah,
cigarettes and tentacles, actually.
Shoot. Yeah, and death. Oh shoot. DCC Lankmar number 6 was another one set in a tower. Yeah.
Although Lankmar has a lot of towers.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I will say, in Lankmar's defense, tying in with Conan, it really does feel like creeping into the old abandoned temple district. So I guess I should fast forward a little bit here, huh?
And isn't there some Dark Tower adventure coming out that contains a Dark Tower? If memory serves.
That has multiple towers. Multiple towers.
Let's not fast forward that fast.
But you could reskin Dark Tower with Tower of the Elephant and Magnific Machinations of the Grand Execution of Marvels. You do both of them in one adventure.
I'll hold you to it. Okay, so we're bookending this 50th episode with our very first guest ever, as Bob mentioned. So returning for the first time since October of 2015. Oh my gosh.
I want to point out it's only been 47 episodes for him. Took Joseph 50. So just, Steven's an easier guest.
I do appreciate you having me on. I always love to chat with all three of you. I can't wait to actually press flesh with you guys at Gary Con in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear, Rick.
Yeah. It is always wonderful to be part of this. I mean, I hear you guys a lot. I feel like I know you guys a lot because you're always in my podcast radio, so it doesn't
your
feel...
ear holes.
Yeah, my ear holes, yeah.
We did just see. It's only been a couple weeks.
That's true.
All right, and that's going to bring us to our DCC feature for the show, which is, interestingly enough, Masks of Lankmar by Michael Curtis. Go for it, Bob.
A heist gone wrong brings an unlikely group of thieves together and sets off a search for forgotten treasures hidden in the city of the Black Toga. Can our heroes of questionable moral character survive the twisting chase that leads through the Plaza of Dark Delights, crosses paths with Shielba of the Eyeless Face, and delves into one of the oddest tenements in Lankmar? Not if the Thieves Guild has their way.
Yeah. Or the people who are actually in that tower.
I just want to say that you've got your Howard in my Liber and your Liber in my Howard, right?
I dare say this tower might be a little deadlier than Howard's, but if I recall, it is only
I don't know. I mean,
it's only a level 1 mod, so maybe. Depends on the dice, right?
Yeah, this is like one of the first Lankmar, like kind of precursors to Lankmar. It was like kind of like a
I think it was the first Lankmar release.
Yeah,
and I remember getting it and just being so excited with how Michael Curtis was approaching the Lankmar setting and eager to learn more. I think this and I can't remember what the title of the other one was, but it's very much like the patrons of Lankmar are very prominent in both stories. And I think one thing that I always remember about this adventure when I got to a chance to play in it is that it has this very sort of intricate description of the trap that's inside the tower, right? It's this detail of that Michael goes into, it's not just like a trap that you have to like have a DC, 15 to overcome with a pick lock check. He gets, into the mechanisms and the workings of the trap and like how mechanically, it makes sense. And I always like tried to take that as a lesson of like, oh yeah, you can even if the players never see that and never experience that, that's such like a good foundation for a judge to like, respond to like some crazy thing that a player does, and it's like, oh, I can understand this in a way that I can respond to that, and I love that about this takeaway from that adventure.
And I mean the theme of having to blend in with your surroundings too, but do the players dare to don the masks? The intrigue is one of my favorite parts about Lankhmar in and of itself.
I love the adventure, but with my strongest memory of Massive Lankhmar, because Massive Lankhmar was released at GaryCon.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember it was released after the What's New with Goodman games, and it was supposed to be some big secret announcement, and I figured it out for the wrong reasons, because I had overheard Michael Curtis talking with Jim Ward and about something they were doing, and I'm like, oh, they're doing something with Jim Ward. That's got to be what the super secret thing is. And so I was looking like, oh, Jim Ward worked on Lankhmar for D&D. Got it. I've got this figured out. Now, Jen already knew, and she wasn't saying a word. And as I rattled this off, she's just sort of staring at me with this weird, you're not right, but you're not wrong look, because they were also announcing a partnership with Jim Ward for Metamorphosis Alpha, and what he was doing had absolutely nothing to do with Lankhmar, but I figured it out the wrong way. So I got the right answer in the wrong fashion. And I will never forget that about Massive Lankhmar. And of course, right after What's New, ran down and picked that up. And it's a fun adventure. I've never run it. I've only played it. And I remember it being tough and weird. And it also has chase rules in it.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah,
which I adapted for blasphemy and larceny. I'm like, well, there's chase rules, I'm going to use them.
I think every module the writers were encouraged to introduce a new technique for chase rules. I know a lot of them have different nuances.
Yeah, and it's
that's
such a tight, I would almost say claustrophobic adventure in some ways.
That's fair. That's fair. I was going to say they carried over the chase mechanic idea and creating new chase mechanics over to Greatest Thieves of Lankhmar, but that is the opposite of a claustrophobic adventure.
Yeah, and in this one, if I recall correctly, I mean, you've got the tower isn't just a freestanding tower. The tower is within a tenement.
Yeah. That's the nice thing, is you have to get through the tenement and have this like great like sort of NPC encounter opportunity, and then the thieves guilds behind it, and that's a cool weird location for the tower. Yeah.
And I forget the name. There was a real life location. It was in China. It was torn down before the Olympics, and it was technically it was a city. It was like a tower city, but it was a tower slum city where people just sort of built and ran cords and things. And I'll find it for the show notes when we post the podcast episode. But that's sort of what I pictured as we were going into this, just this tight little spaces to go through, but filled with life and no small hint of despair.
Yeah.
The Stack City is the MacGuffin in, or not the MacGuffin, the setting, if you will, in Ready Player One. So I don't know if you guys have read that or seen the movie, but in its dystopic future, it's like basically a trailer park that's been stacked vertically.
Yeah.
And so if you ever wanted to reskin or grab some ideas from that, to have that like I don't want to say apocalyptic, but certainly dystopian tower.
It's very dystopian.
Yes.
The fact that there was such a place in existence until they cleared it to make room for a stadium for the Olympics, it says a lot about China. but it
a little bit Attack the Block.
but there's that's a different type of tower. but yeah, it's a great adventure, and again, with Lankmar. Lankmar is the city filled with thieves, and Erzhun in Zamoria is the city of thieves. So you can sort of see the comparison and the overlays. And while I often say that every fantasy city you've ever read is just an echo of Lankmar, I can't help but wonder, because we know Fritz Leiber read Howard. I can't help but wonder if Lankmar might be an echo of Erzhun.
Interesting.
It's a thought.
Well, there's some excellent food for thought, and I think we've pretty much well,
one last shout out before we go into our outro. The chase mechanics are one of those things I love about Langmar, but kind of if you're looking for like another version of that, or like an early precursor, one of the first things that caught my eye with GCC was the zine, The Metal Gods of Haddad.
Oh yeah,
which has like this urban chase sort of rolling encounter mechanic. Well worth checking out if you like the Langmar stuff.
That was a great mechanic.
Great call out.
Because it dealt with more like finding the exit from the neighborhood and moving to the next.
Yeah. And so I love that. And that zine probably doesn't get enough attention for. It was a very limited series, but for DCC fans who want to kind of go back to some of the early stuff, that's a great resource. So.
That's a deep track there, Mark.
Yeah, nice.
The Street
50th
Kids
episode
zine, yeah.
Well, Stephen, are you good to stay with us for another 5 minutes or so?
Sure, love to.
Awesome. So we promised you something special, and so here it is. Elena, are you ready? Because it's time to open up the Sanctum Secorum's very own
Prize Closet of Mystery.
For our 50th episode, we are doing something truly special this time. One lucky winner will receive the last unclaimed copy of the Shrouded Grimoire, which is number 10 of 10. And if I recall, is that hardcover?
That is.
It compiles 5 years worth of foreboding magics and arcane lore. And the library itself contains 37 new spells and 13 new patrons to bring to your DCC RPG table. To enter, you just need to drop us an email. That's thehub@sanctum.media with the title of your favorite Appendix N book or story. And one lucky winner will be drawn at random. We'll break out the funky dice for you and everything. And we'll announce you, the winner, during next month's show. Just send the email to thehub@sanctum.media with Sanctum Contest in the subject line, so we don't confuse it for an entry in the Sanctum Secorum reading room drawing, because 2 shows, same producer. Yeah, it's complicated. And Bob, you want to talk to us about our other special thing this year?
Yeah. Amidst shows and GaryCon this month, we're also launching Sanctum Secorum Quarterly. The first issue is almost done, and it is loaded with content from people like Daniel J. Bishop, James Posenel, Joan Troyer, ourselves, a whole lot more. As I mentioned earlier, the premiere issue has the adventure Temple of the Elephant. There are expansion on monster swarms and potion fumbles, discussions of film and fiction. It's going to be a beast. It's coming in, and watch Jen's eyes cross as I say this. It's going to be about somewhere between 32 pages long. So
she's coming off screen.
I'm getting all the red pens.
And the best thing is it's still going to be absolutely and utterly free. So whether you're interested in joining the team, contributing for a single issue, or just want more information, you can drop us a line at the hub at Sanctum Media. we're always looking for new material by new voices and helping folks get their stuff out there. And speaking of new material and new voices, be sure to check out the releases from our partner Ugandan author Ashraf Braden. Currently, the Kakando and Lakwata are available on drive-thru. They're $1 each. And the next release, the Bakwezi, is due out any day now, and it includes a full character class.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Wait. Okay, so the other stuff is these are a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
These okay, and I'm piecing them in for our viewers. The other's free?
Yep.
Are you sure, Bob?
Yep. But well, and with the materials we're doing with Ashraf, Ashraf is he is a game designer living in rural Uganda, and all of Sanctum's proceeds from that, after drive-thru takes
from that title,
cut, everything goes to Ashraf, including affiliate sales. It all goes to him. So
nice.
you can really help support a new voice and get materials that are wholly new and different. They're culturally different. They're exciting, and it makes them, I think, makes them a lot of fun.
And it brings a fresh feel to your table. Your players won't expect it. It's not something that most of us sitting around the table here in the US are liable to predict.
Yeah, and while both the Kakando and Lakwata are monsters, the Kakando has rules for a new weapon. The Lakwata has, I believe, a couple new weapons, as well as probably the most blood-curdling mighty deed that you will ever come across, which is dismembering attacks.
And pronunciation guides, both written and audio.
Yes.
Which are pretty exciting to this nerd right here.
Yeah. So, we're 50 episodes in now.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to say it. If you're enjoying the show, please comment on the podcast. Almost by posting a review on iTunes, commenting on YouTube or on Twitch. Join us in the stream chat. It's always lovely to see folks. Hey, Joan just logged in.
Leave a comment on Drive-Thru RPG if
you're
you're getting the zines.
Yeah, those ratings reviews actually do make a difference. It all hail the mighty algorithms. And it tells the algorithms what sort of things you like and helps you find new things, and it helps other people find us.
And it helps other people find the community, which I think is almost more important at this point with all of the new fans out there. Help bring them together and realize why DCC was created. As the Dark Master himself said earlier in the show, there are so many similarities just between this one little 3-chapter story and the feel of so many parts of DCC as a whole.
Yeah, and the community is one of my favorite things about DCC. It's why we do a free companion zine. It's why now we're doing Sanctum Secorum quarterly for free, and it's why people are contributing to it. Right? I mean, it's between that and the Gong Farmers Almanac, and there's so many wonderful free resources because our community pitches in. And,
right. I mean, I would say that's kind of why we do the show too. Yeah. I was just gonna say, the community is my favorite part of DCC. I mean, I was introduced by DCC, but as the commercials like to say, you have a lot of choices today in your old school adventuring. And
I love it.
The DCC community, the love, the camaraderie, the fellowship amongst the authors and the players and all the teams, it just can't be matched. So I think you're absolutely right, Bob. We should help foster that environment and just keep that love flowing. Yeah. And thank you 3 for being a big part of that. I mean, it's shows like this and reaching out and the generosity that you give to these new creators is just exemplary. So thank you for all that you do. And Elena in the background there, wherever she is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just want to point out, we first started doing this, we were new creators too, right? I mean, It's like, almost everyone that started on Spellburn went on to write for Goodman Games. Everyone that has been on Sanctum Secorum as a keeper of mysteries has gone on to write something, at least one thing for Goodman Games. It's one of those things where the community lifts everybody up.
Yeah.
And Stephen's one of the first third-party publishers from back in the day.
Back in the day.
Weren't you the first, or did someone snake that from you?
I think Sorcerer snaked it by a day or two, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Something like that. Maybe a 3-day difference.
We were like we all had our products in the can at the point, but we were like told, okay, so don't release it until after the book got released. And then I think he was just quicker on the publish button after the initial book was launched. So it will always be our great feud.
You have been a boon to the community as well, Mr. Newton.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Big Skull's put out some really good stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of community, if you're going to GaryCon next week, feel free to say hi to us, and we'd love to meet fans, especially.
And we might have some swag for you.
Yeah,
maybe might.
Looking forward to seeing our community in person again.
Yes, very much so. And if you join us here next month at our regular time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern, again, we had a time difference to make Joseph's schedule, and we will be discussing Poul Anderson's The Broken Sword, and it will be the book version, not a movie version, because we don't hate Marc.
Okay, so we can eventually read the High Crusade.
The High Crusade movie still gives me nightmares.
My God, I still to this day I really still hated that first Poul Anderson book we read. So
3 Hearts, 3 Lions.
Yeah,
I think we read that one with Dave Beatty.
Yeah,
was that back in the? Yeah,
I remember listening to your guys' review of that. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I got hate mail for that.
Yeah.
I really just did not.
Oh, yeah. And there have been times during other podcasts where, Bob, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, Demetri, it wasn't that terrible. It wasn't that great either. I'm just going to go on record again.
And you got to have fun with what you do, right? If it's a slog, you end up not enjoying yourself, and nobody wants to watch that either. So we've got to have fun with our friends here and our new family, as I keep calling it. It's just, I now have like 4 million kids as opposed to the tiny little circle we started with. So I think that about does it for us. Any last words?
Is the 50th our longest episode ever? Is this?
Yes, yes, it is. This is well, because we had an episode that was broken into 2 parts.
Yeah,
but it was released as 2 parts. So this is our longest single episode.
I apologize to the editors ahead of time.
Thank you to all our guests for joining us, who got a chance to speak with us. It's been a pleasure. Stephen, you're always one of my favorite folks to game with, and I always enjoy your adventures. So thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you here.
Yeah, thank you to Stephen and Francis and Joseph for coming on.
Yes.
And making our 50th episode special.
Totally appreciate it. And I'm happy to be here for the next 50, whenever that happens.
Hopefully that won't take another 7 years. So there we have it. We hope we've inspired you. Thanks everyone for listening.
Be inspired.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.